All right, everyone, thank you so much for your patience. And welcome to our Salesforce CPQ Gotchas and Best Practices with Derek Black. Before we get started, I just want to walk you through some housekeeping items. And Derek, doesn't look like my controls are working. Do you mind changing the slide for me?
No problem.
Thank you. So, as you guys can tell, you are muted currently. The only way you're going to be able to communicate with us is going to be through that questions box. So just to make sure that you guys know where that is, how it works, go ahead and type in there now. Let us know where you are in the world. Happy Tuesday, whatever you want to say, just so that we know that you can hear us okay and that you're out there. So I'm in Colorado Springs, Colorado right now. I see we got some Madison, Wisconsin. Perfect. Oh, wow, lots of responses. I'm very excited for today's presentation. We have a ton of people joining from all over the place. I see some from Canada, from Europe, from everywhere. India, thank you for joining us today. From Philly, awesome. Welcome, everyone. So as you guys know, that's how you're going to communicate. During this presentation, we've got a couple dedicated sections. At the end of each section, we'll be answering all of your questions. If we can't get to your question at the time, don't worry, we will answer it. We'll email you later. We'll make sure that we get your questions answered. The next thing that we're going to be doing is taking poll questions throughout this presentation. So just to give you guys an idea of how that works, what it looks like, we're going to send you a fun poll now. And it's just, what's the first thing you're going to do when you're able to stop social distancing? So we know that it's been a very trying time for a lot of people. A lot of people are probably cooking at home. I know I put in there, I'm going out to eat. I'm so sick of doing dishes. But this is how these polls are going to work. You're going to see it on your screen. You'll have a couple, minutes to go ahead and take it, and then we'll share it out. And this really helps us to cater this conversation towards you guys, whatever you want to hear, so that we can make sure that you guys are getting the most out of this presentation. So I'm so happy everyone's taking this poll. It looks like we've got a variety of answers. I see a couple people wrote in others, so please type in the questions what you are doing, because we'd love to hear that too. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll here in just a few seconds, and we'll share it out. So go ahead and get those answers in. Okay, awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and share it. This is how it'll work. We'll show you guys what you're answering so you know what's going on in this presentation too. Looks like most people need a haircut and they want to go out to eat. Not surprised at all. So happy to see that, which is great. Derek, do you mind going to the next slide?
Sure.
So this is my introduction for Eric. There is no one better to be doing this presentation today. Derek has been working in the quote to cash space since 2011. He has helped over 150 Salesforce CPQ projects go live. He's impacted hundreds, if not thousands of customers, and even trained many of Salesforce's own customer success specialists in CPQ. So he's got a plethora of knowledge to really impart on you guys today, from planning to maintaining. Truly no one better. And before we get started, I want to go over a little bit about what we are talking about today. So from planning to maintaining, we've got all these steps. This is just a little overview. We're going to talk about 8 project domains, where we're beginning in this journey, implementing, so identifying what team, that might surprise you, who all is involved in this project, organizing your single source of truth, and then of course managing, so setting up CPQ, what is the agile process, how do you maintain that? So before we get started, we're going to take one quick poll before I pass it off to Derek. And we want to know where you are in your CPQ journey. So this is going to help us to understand where you guys are coming from, what sections of this presentation to take a little longer on. Are you currently evaluating CPQ? Maybe you heard of it, you're just trying to get some research on it. You've already committed to CPQ, and now you're planning that implementation. Are you working with a partner or doing it yourself in implementations, or are you just maintaining it currently? So go ahead, answer that. I'll give you just a couple more seconds and we'll go ahead and move forward. So Derek, it's some interesting answers. Looks like we got a lot of people implementing, a lot of people maintaining, and looking for some tips and tricks there.
Cool.
Very cool. Okay, so with that, I'm gonna get off camera. I'm gonna give Derek all the attention. So Derek, it's all on you. Have fun.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm seeing a lot of familiar names in the attendees list, so surprised you want to listen to me yammer about CPQ again, but hopefully if you haven't heard me do this talk before, it's useful, interesting information for you. So the first thing we're going to talk about is kind of, you're planning to use Salesforce CPQ and what all that entails. When kicking off a CPQ project, planning it, it's important to understand this will be a transformational process for your business. CPQ can completely change how companies package projects, manage pricing, or even go to market in general. So there are potential impacts up and downstream systems that you can maybe eliminate needs for outdated technology, or maybe they require integrations to take care of new business inputs from CPQ. So you will want to have committed time, not just from IT, but you must also include sales, product management, finance, or sometimes even marketing in this process of understanding who you need involved and all the conversations that you've had. Myself, I've often said any successful CPQ project that I've been a part of has gone on hold for at least 6 weeks while people try and go find the right people to answer the questions that I have to get everything set up. Hopefully some of you people that are in the planning or evaluating stage can prove me wrong and avoid that by kind of taking some advice we'll go through today. So understand that you'll be making a lot of business process, go-to-market, and system changes as you implement CPQ. You're buying something new to improve your process and fix things, not necessarily revisit everything that you're doing right now. So use this as an opportunity to understand where there are inefficiencies and where you can eliminate them. Get the correct people involved early and have access to them throughout the project, not only to eliminate delays, but to make the best use of your investment here. When working through CPQ, I kind of see that this is split into 8 major, you could call them project domains or functionality domains. And I have some comments on how you want to manage this. From my experience across hundreds of products, I recommend a specific order and approach for organizing requirements and project phases. The first most important piece of any CPQ project is understanding how you will want to structure your product catalog. Without this basis, it's not possible to build or understand how these products will work together as the pieces of the C of CPQ configuration. Both the catalog and the technically validated configurations are key items to be solved before implementing any pricing structure. So you want to make sure that you're getting the right products that work together, that everything's technically valid before you really start focusing on how to get the prices correct. There's a lot of pricing inputs that come with just configuration, so you want to get configuration done first and make sure that that is working fully as you expect. So after you've done that, you can move on to pricing. These things should be solution first and in that specific order. The other 5 domains are all cool, important things too, but they rely on the foundation being built by products and pricing. Obsessing over quote templates or approvals before you complete the first steps, sort of like buying a hot water heater when you don't even own a house. So you want to make sure that you have a strong foundation and then start implementing some of these things that are really great things to have for your business, but not really as foundational to CPQ. So to start out with, let's get into each one of these areas and discuss what you want to be thinking about as you gather requirements and sketch out what you need to know. I've said it plenty of times, but I cannot say it enough. The product catalog is the most important and fundamental part of your implementation. This will be the first input to the entire CPQ process. This is where you can set up products to act as subscriptions, which will define not only if they can be renewed, but how the prices will be prorated for multi-year, partial term quotes, anything like that that you might be doing. You can determine if variations of a product are truly different items or things that can be described by price and by attributes like color, size, region, language, what other attributes there are to the product. If you're essentially selling the same thing, there's no reason to create multiple product SKUs for something that's essentially the same thing over and over again. Oftentimes, CPQ can simplify and change dramatically how your products are modeled. Personally, I've worked through a client's existing catalog of 150,000 SKUs and helped them recreate that model with just 35 product records. And that was just through the course of an afternoon. Sat down, got their whole pricing catalog, said, hey, you know, you really only sell like 20 things. And like, yeah, you're right. And I used CPQ functionality to model and recreate everything that they could sell in that big catalog with just 35 products. Salesforce CPQ does not need to be the same mess as an ERP that has been in use for 15 years. So spend time considering how you can use this product to make life easier rather than recreating existing processes and structures. Oftentimes, it can be even easier to build an integration with a simplified model that extends and matches external system needs than relying to try to build it again. With CPQ, you have an opportunity to improve both user and customer experience by making it easier to select products for quoting, as well as present them to your customers and prospects. The next piece of this, after you have a good idea of all the products that you'll be selling with CPQ, it's time to consider how they are configured or work together to provide solutions to your customers. Bundle is a bit of a loaded word. Everyone has a preconceived notion of what this is in CPQ before they actually ever see them. As a consultant, I always try to avoid using this word altogether when planning this piece of the project. I'd also often speak about product families, configurable products, attribute-based products, suggested or required add-ons, you know, different things that are really what get to the essential of what bundles are for CPQ. Bundles are what are used to configure and ensure technical validity of any products or combinations of products your company will be selling. They're not necessarily single sets of products sold for a single price. They can be an entire suite of products that encompass a whole solution, each with their own individual prices. Or I mean, they can be single sets of products too. There's a lot of possibility here. The bundle design is also how your sales team will be presented options for selling value and going to market with your company's products. It's important to consider the user experience here. So quotes can be put together quickly, easily, and error-free, and all the corrected suggested items for a great customer solution. So don't clutter up bundles with hundreds of options to scroll through. We want your sales reps to be able to quickly and easily get to what they want to do, be concise and direct with setting up your reps and customers with what they need, and meet your business objectives for your company through the configuration of your products. Make this quick, easy ways to pick what's going to be presented to the customer. Now that you've got everything in your product catalog right, you're getting correctly configured products onto a quote, you're ready to make sure that they're getting priced correctly. The basic catalog and bundle setup can impart a lot of good pricing data, but it might not be the end-all be-all for your company. Where you can consider the C of CPQ to be the technical validation of a quote, the P can be considered the commercial validation of a quote. It's best to start working on adjustments to the pricing after you get a good start of it with a simple catalog. There can be a lot of easy out-of-the-box price setting capabilities in this tool that can work to set margin-based pricing, customer-specific pricing, tiered pricing, or many other standard pricing strategies. So you can really get a lot just by staying in the box and taking the solutions that are part of this product. One important thing to keep in mind when setting up automation for pricing is that you're essentially setting the go-to-market price of your products. Anything that you have automated will be the first price that your sales reps see and are given to lead with their customers. You may or may not want this to be the biggest discount you will allow. Think about how you will set a starting price and how you may or may not allow discretionary discounts, and consider impacts on how this might play into approvals as well. So keep in mind that this isn't really the end of the project here. There's other things that come in downstream, like approvals, that can really holistically shape how your sales team is interacting with you as either business leaders or presenting your products into the market. So there's a lot that goes into these decisions that you're going to make. So after you've finished building all the fundamental things, building your product catalog, configurations, and pricing, I would say you can now kind of start working on the other 5 domains in CPQ. You could do these in parallel if you'd like. So once you've got all the fundamentals down, you can kind of expand out and assign other teams to work on all these things. Approvals are often pretty easily understood and well documented. If they aren't by your business, then work to document expected approval flows for different scenarios. If you find that it's difficult or requires a large amount of steps and considerations, think of these options. Simplify the process. Use this opportunity to analyze who is involved in the process and why. Determine if there are redundant or superfluous steps in the approval process. Does every quote that you make really need to go to approval? Especially now that you've already completed pricing controls and setting your go-to-market price and maybe putting in thresholds in the quote itself. You may be able to eliminate some things that you had to do before when everything was coming in Excel or something like that. You may also be able to find that a single approver can cover many functions. You may not necessarily need to send this to every single product manager involved. You might be able to find someone to cover a bunch of different roles. Or if pricing approval is needed, maybe someone from a deal desk type of scenario can approve that, or you can use a group or something like that. You may be able to consolidate or standardize approval processes across many business units and product lines. So if different business units have small other little variations in approvals, you can use this as an opportunity to standardize across your business as a whole how things move through that process. You also want to evaluate whether or not you need advanced approvals. Advanced approvals are part of the CPQ Plus package and license. These will allow for parallel approvals as well as smart approvals. Parallel approvals are useful for processes that need to go to multiple independent approvers. So like if it needs to go to finance as well as product management, those approvals typically aren't really reliant on one another, and you might as well send it to both departments at the same time. The advanced approvals module allows you to do that, whereas Salesforce standard approvals do not. Smart approvals are also useful for this type of use case too, but also if quotes are often rejected. So what smart approvals do is they allow you to keep track of the approval history, and if things get rejected and need to be resubmitted, if nothing that affects that threshold has changed, it will automatically stay approved. So if you approved a 35% discount and the discount is still 35%, it doesn't ask you to approve it again. But if payment terms were changed and it needs to go to finance for approval, it will hit finance again. You will also want to consider using pricing controls to eliminate some of this. So like I was kind of saying on the last slide, you'll never need to approve certain margins or discounts if you simply don't allow those to be saved on a quote. You can set floors, ceilings, or other types of limits inside of CPQ to maintain pricing and configuration guidance. If you've done a good job on the earlier steps of the project, likely errors that appeared in the past that need reviewed or approved will just be gone. You're not going to need these approvals anymore because the things that were going wrong in the past are just gone. Another thing that can reduce approval requests is to give guidance on quotes in real time to your sales team. Messaging or images can be used to show the level of approval needed based on updates to the quote. I've once had a client have me put in a picture of Dr. Claw from Inspector Gadget on the quote line anytime that approval needed to go to the CEO. So it's just like the evil metal hand on a desk anytime that an approval level got certain high as a kind of fun small company. But those are the types of things you can do. You can immediately put feedback into the quote line editor to let people know if they're going out of bounds, and once they see Dr. Claw, they usually ratchet back the discount a little bit. The next thing, another thing that you can start doing is quote templates. You'll want to use this project to standardize how quotes are presented to your customers. Oftentimes, companies building out CPQ have one of these two problems. They don't have any sort of standardized template for presenting pricing information. They're sending out PDFs of Excel spreadsheets or they're pasting together like data into Word documents. There's no real way that they're, as a company standard, presenting pricing or product information to customers. They're just kind of getting it out any way that they can, and everything is fine. Or, well, it's not really fine, but they're okay with doing what they need to do to get pricing out. Or they have different standards for each business region, business unit, or product line. And you could have like 43,000 different templates that are available that need to be used. And most of these are pretty much all the same, but with like little differences here and there. Really, your customers don't care what they get. They just want something that's easy to read and easy to make their buying decision. They don't particularly care where information is laid out on the header, and they care equally as little if they're in the UK, Brazil, Italy, US, or Canada. The little regional differences that will come up, as you see in templates, to your customers really aren't relevant. So this is a good opportunity to standardize what you're doing across your templates. So you want to design templates that easily present the technical and the commercial details of any type of deal that you're selling. So this kind of ties back into the idea that configuration does the technical validation and pricing does the commercial validation. So make sure that that is easily communicated. Oftentimes, a large amount of different requirements, languages, and presentation styles can be accomplished with just one template. I've seen people, say they have 40, 50 different templates, and then at the end of, requirements gathering, we sort it out so they have one single template that does everything. A CPQ template can be really dynamic and automatically change to meet needs for different scenarios. So it's likely that you can get it done with many fewer than you would actually expect. One last good piece of advice is to put overall decisions of the template's final state into one decision maker or a small group without any kind of defined authority. This can truly be never ending. You'll just always have people making kind of non-critical demands of how they want little things to be laid out or spaced. And if you just have a good central authority on what stays and what goes in the quote template, this will eliminate that kind of scope creep. The next piece of this is guided selling. If you've done all the other parts of the CPQ project well, you'll likely already accomplished a pretty good guided selling process for your reps. Guided sellings, like bundles, is a pretty loaded term in regards to CPQ. It's both like an overall experience as well as the name of a CPQ product and feature. You can have a guided selling process that's awesome without using the guided selling feature. Basically, what you want to consider here is the overall user experience for adding products to the quote. If the product catalog itself is not easy to navigate, you might want to consider using search filters, bundles, price books. These things can help you effectively segment the visible products based on aspects of the deal that you already know from the account, opportunity, or other quote information. The cool capabilities of guided selling that you saw as a pop-up window in your demo of CPQ are even cooler when you don't have to use a pop-up. So most of these filtering capabilities can be accomplished without interacting with that little window. The little window, the guided selling product feature, is great though for when data about the products that you're selling is not really known until a quote is being made. If your sales team is often getting right into the quoting process with a very large product catalog and discovering customer information at the time they're making the quote, the guided selling pop-up is a great tool. I mean, it allows you to navigate through questions that are being answered kind of in real time, narrow down the sales catalog, and hit that mark. But I'd say that most people using CPQ are doing it in kind of a bit of a slower B2B process where they're not necessarily quoting right in front of a customer. So if your sales team knows most of the information about the opportunity, account, and quote before they even start adding products, consider automating this process of product selection without using that guided selling feature. Renewals and amendments. This is probably the Salesforce CPQ product's strongest differentiator in the market. It's really good at managing recurring business and subscriptions. The setup of the product should already be well decided and understood as how do they relate to renewals and amendments by this point. The other pieces of the puzzle to determine here are how renewal and amendments quotes and opportunities will be managed. Because this is a little bit different when you're dealing with an existing customer base that has, assets, subscriptions, different things that you care about. Salesforce CPQ can automatically generate, all of these things in addition to quotes. So it'll make all the opportunities for renewals and amendments, as well as create the quotes for them. Decisions on when they should be made, like when do I want to create this renewal opportunity and who they should be assigned to, and like what these things look like after they've been created, are things you're going to have to decide on. This will require not only understanding of how these work today, but how your process can be improved. I once worked with a client that did all their renewals for $1 billion business in December, just because they didn't have a good method for tracking contracts and who owned what products. They just had a team of people that said, all right, it's December, it's renewal time, we're gonna do this. And when we implemented renewals there, I had to fight with them about this being a bad idea. And I won the fight, and they can now do renewals spread across the entire year, sync contracts with their customers to meet up with their budgeting needs. So instead of just saying, all right, it's December, I'm going to renew you, they can have better conversations that sync with those customers' fiscal years or when they're going to be deciding how much money they have to spend with your company. They also have better visibility to overall revenue and forecasting, and ability to target churn and upsells. Right now, my role at Proudly, I'm the Director of Customer Success, and I depend on this renewal and amendment automation too. We use CPQ here. And it lets me know in advance who in my client base is up for renewal, how much their contract is worth, and it automatically generates quotes with the appropriate products on them. So this is really important automation that you need to consider. Order management is the 8th and kind of final piece of this. CPQ can interact with the order object. This can be a must-have, nice to have, or completely unnecessary, depending on your business needs. It's a must-have if you're using Salesforce billing or if you have to keep track of individual items being shipped or provisioned. The order will give you a layer of abstraction from the opportunity in the quote that allows you to update or change specifics like start dates or quantities shipped after your deal is closed won. Some businesses don't really have this problem. Everything they sell in a quote is automatically provided, and there's no discrepancies between what's on the opportunity and what ends up in the customer's hands. In this case, orders might not be necessary at all. So the last thing to think about here as you're planning is, how do I get everyone to use this cool new thing I spent all this money on? Or, well, maybe this is one of the first things you think about, but you want to, put some strong attention here. The technology here is the easy part. The difficult thing is getting people to use it and making sure that it lands in their hands in a nice way. So how these impacts will, end up with the stakeholders, the end users, is much more difficult to manage. You want to make sure that you're keeping every person engaged with how the implementation is going and how they're going to benefit from it when it goes live. You want to manage rollout to bring value to your most common use cases first, and then work on more difficult corner cases later. Everyone may not be able to do everything from day one, and that's okay. The goal is to make day 1 better than day 0 and day 100 better than day 10. So you want to kind of iterate through these things and keep providing more and more value as you move along. It's important, beyond understanding how to phase functionality and releases, that you also have training and adoption stages planned before go live. You'll need testing and training orgs. You'll need videos and help guides. You can use My Trailhead to build out internal training to kind of augment hands-on practice that you might be doing in sandbox orgs. And the next piece of this is around implementation. And I think Tori has another poll question.
Yeah, we actually have a couple questions really quick about that last section. So okay. Fabian is asking, how often do you tell a customer some configs should stop being available? So it kind of sounds like your other story. when it's too hard to handle or too complex for the user experience? When do you tell them they should hold off on that?
That's kind of a broad question and hard to answer. I mean, the way that you know what's going to work and what's not going to work is really through experience. So being able to guide that, you want to make sure that you have like a trusted resource that has done many projects before to really know what's going to be easy or not. So, you know, we have some things where we're talking about kind of building out your team on this. And it's really important to try to not do this alone for the first time if you feel that you have these complicated things that might need to wait. One thing to kind of navigate that is to always make sure that your first releases or your first things that you're kind of doing testing are just minimal viable product where, hey, you can get a quote, it sells your actual products, it has good pricing on it, and you can get a quote template out of it. If you kind of start there and then start adding on functionality, you can probably get yourself into a good path of doing something really complicated and robust as an endpoint at some time.
Awesome. And then we got one other question. So Fabian, if that answered your question, just let us know. But Neil is asking, is there a best practice for where to manage the base or list price for products in CPQ or in ERP? And if in ERP, then is it best to push the price, best to push the price data into CPQ via batch or provide, sorry, this is a long one, provide real time?
Yeah, I kind of get the gist of this question. I'm going to talk about that here in a couple slides. But it is something you definitely need to decide is what's going to be the source of truth. Best source of truth can really vary between companies. It really depends on where like prices are truly being authored and if the people creating the prices only have access to certain systems or not. So if your product managers don't use Salesforce at all, you probably can't have Salesforce be the source of truth for your pricing. If that's not the case, I typically recommend that you make Salesforce your source of truth for pricing if you're using it as the CPQ. The closer the source of truth is to your quoting tool, the easier it's going to be able to be like agile in the marketplace, as well as, you know, manage that for direct end use by your sales reps and get it to your customers kind of in a more efficient manner. If you have to do it in another system, I mean, that's completely doable. But yeah, you just need to decide if something's a system of truth, like how do you quickly get that to be integrated and moved to where it is, you know, impacting people's, you know, end use and day-to-day life, that type of thing.
Perfect. Well, we got a couple questions, but maybe we'll try to get to them at the end since we're running a little behind. I do have a poll for everybody. So the next one we're going to ask is, how are you planning to implement? Right? Are you using an internal team? Are you working with a Salesforce consulting partner or implementation partner? Is Salesforce doing this for you directly, or are you trying to do this on your own? So go ahead, I'm going to leave that open for just a few more minutes, try to get as many answers as we can. And again, if we didn't get to your guys' question, we do have an office hours coming up. We'll try to get to all of our questions at the end, but again, we have another office hours coming up where we can answer all your questions there too. All right, I'm gonna leave that poll up for just a few more seconds, so go ahead and answer it. But it looks like most of you guys are using some sort of implementation partner, which is good to know.
Yeah, I'm surprised to see Salesforce at 9%. They were maybe doing like 3 to 5% of the implementations when I was working there last year. So cool to see that they're expanding their services. It's great.
Very cool.
So yeah, the next thing we wanted to talk about is implementing. So, you know, let the arguments begin. This may be more of a planning item, but as you start to build out your implementation, you'll need to decide what systems and people truly own a lot of types of data. If you can get everything on Salesforce, is typically the best end result. That might not always be possible or practical. The 4 items mentioned here, beyond just pricing that already came up, can be the most contentious. Chances are that pricing and product data are not necessarily being authored and maintained in Salesforce as your system of record before starting this project, but maybe they will be after, because you now have the ability to manage these things pretty completely on the Salesforce platform. So for product and pricing master, yeah, usually you'll kind of migrate that to being on Salesforce as the system of record. If it's not possible, then you can work out some type of integration, but this is usually the best path. It's very likely that customer master data is already in Salesforce as your source of truth. If it's not, you will need this to successfully create quotes and opportunities and manage assets and things like that. So that's something you're going to want to sort out, is who owns this and where do the final changes get made. Order data is something that will often not be finalized in Salesforce. This is usually just stays in the ERP, but it's possible to manage all this in Salesforce, especially if you're using billing. You're going to determine where this data is going to be stored, how it's going to be changed, and what requirements are for integrations. The integration piece might be the most difficult pieces of this puzzle. So you're going to need to nail this down as you go through, like who owns what. There's not really any wrong answers. There's some things that make the CPQ implementation itself easier, but they might not necessarily be what you can do or not. So just make sure that you are getting a strong understanding of who owns what. That's the most important piece. Don't let there be any gray areas around this. The next piece of advice is to stay inside of the box. What this means is don't immediately try to do things that the CPQ product is not good at. The product has been deployed by thousands of companies and is very feature rich. If you're finding that it doesn't do something you need, you probably don't actually need to do that thing. If you do the first few phases of a project without any customizations, you'll be in a better place to add on custom pieces in the future. You'll also likely find more efficient ways to conduct your quote to cash process if you follow general guidance of the product's functionality. Experienced CPQ architects will know what is a good idea for customization, and bad ones will rely on the 2 or 3 tricks they know to getting anything across the line. So make sure you're fully exploring the depth of the CPQ functionality before deciding to customize any part of it. If you do find required customizations, stay within the framework provided by CPQ plugins. So there's the quote calculator plugin, there's the custom configurator, there's product search plugins. There's a lot of plugins that can really make or break and do a lot of things that you might not see in the normal UI, you might not see in the normal price calculation. Just using these plugins gets you a long way. So from there, like a great deal of customization can be done, and it'll work in harmony with the managed package code that is running in the CPQ product. This will also, ensure that you can adapt easily in the future as businesses change or the package is upgraded. You'll be working within kind of an expected framework for customizations there. Again, I may have said this earlier, but if something seems too hard to get done, maybe it is. Maybe you don't need to manage that part of the business or that use case the day you go live. Avoid trying to implement every corner case and work from a foundation where you're getting 70 to 90% of your needs finished from day one. Then work through the remaining 30 to 10% as you maintain and improve the system. The concept of diminishing returns is in play with your CBQ implementation, just like anything else in life. By analyzing overall goals and keeping in mind the reason for buying this technology, you'll understand if you're holding up the greater good for something that's not really needed by the majority. So, make sure that you're focusing on getting the most results early. If something is hard and like not really going to be driving that much business value, then you might want to consider doing it at a later phase. So yeah, now we're on to the manage part of this, and I believe Tori has another poll.
I do. I've got a couple questions here as well. Let's see. So this one is from Mohammed, and he just needs some extra light on any features around using Einstein for intelligent pricing recommendations, if you know anything around that.
Yeah, so the Einstein pricing piece of this, I can't remember exactly what that functionality is called. It's really something you just kind of turn on. It's really dependent on the scope of data that you already have in the system. So as far as like implementation standpoint, you just want to make sure that for the inputs that it takes, which are typically historical quotes, that you have a lot of information there to feed it. The pricing guidance, the Einstein piece of it may or may not be exactly what you care about. You can also implement your own pricing guidance that sets, floor, ceiling prices, expected discounts, those types of things that might actually be smarter than what Einstein is spitting out. So you might want to do some of that analysis too if you're planning on using the Einstein pricing guidance.
Perfect. And then Jitendar, and I apologize if I didn't say your name right. He's asking if this is available in Enlightening or is it also available in Classic?
Yeah, it works in both. There's not really much to consider when deciding Lightning versus Classic. This CBQ product will work in both. I mean, generally using Salesforce, you want to be on Lightning because that's where all of the rich enhancements are coming from. So if you want to really stay abreast of everything that's going to be new in any Salesforce product, you want to be on Lightning. But for simple rollout, it doesn't really matter which version of Sales Cloud you're on.
Perfect. So that's that, and then we're going to launch our final question. So what is your scope? How are you guys currently maintaining and updating your CPQ? Are you doing this directly in production? One full copy sandbox, maybe multiple sandboxes? Are you using DX? Maybe you just haven't decided yet. Go ahead and answer that. Let us know if you're doing it directly in production. A little concerned, but that seems to be one of the least popular answers, which is good.
Now just go for it. If you know what you're doing, it's no problem, right? Just make a typo in a price rule. It's fine.
See what happens.
Yeah.
So bad advice. All right, here are the answers, Derek.
Cool. So most people are using sandboxes. Only 1% using DX. DX is really going to be the future of how people develop this. So sad to see that it's that low. So maybe some of those I haven't decided yet, people will move and use DX to manage everything. All right, so we can move on to manage. So, having worked on hundreds of projects myself, a lot of times people get to the point where they're ready to do their first deployment and say, hey, how do I add my CPQ data to a change set and deploy it? Well, the answer is you can't. So hopefully I can help you avoid being one of those people. CPQ and some other packages for Salesforce are configured by making record data. That is a bit different than how Salesforce platform or Sales Cloud implementation work. It's mostly done by metadata changes. Accounting for this difference and planning how to regularly migrate this record data is just as important for your process as building and maintaining change sets. To accomplish the record data migration, you can develop a methodology of data loader to export, organize, and import dozens of objects using CPQ while maintaining all their references to one another, all the kind of things you would do with VLOOKUPs in Excel to make the IDs match. Or you can use a product like Proudly to automate this data migration. So for the people saying that they're using multiple sandboxes, this type of diagram probably looks familiar to you. If you're using multiple sandboxes in your stack, each sandbox being used in your overall development architecture, you need to have a good governance strategy for the movement of data as well as metadata. And more plain English, you need to have the who, what, when, where, why, and how written down and scheduled for moving changes between the orgs you're managing. So this applies to all the reference data that CPQ uses, as well as all the metadata. You actually find that the metadata changes that you need in implementing CPQ are pretty minimal, but the amount of data you're creating is massive. So widely shared and well-known plans for when deployments and refreshes are expected should be known by your admins, developers, and consultants. If there's an upcoming event that risks overriding needed data, plans for how to create backups should be considered. One trick of the trade is to push data and settings into a free developer sandbox so you can recover it later if something goes wrong. So kind of imagine like an emergency escape route to a panic room, private island type of thing as part of this diagram as well, where you can, ship over data to some, safe house org or something like that to, make sure that you're preserving things before you do like a big push or update to something. Another piece of this is you want to, plan for user adoption from the outset. You want to do requirements gathering, testing, and training. They're all keys to a success project. You need to engage end users throughout all phases of the implementation. Let people know what's coming and that the project is ultimately for them. You want to outline the overall plan for improvements and develop the what's in it for me results to be shared with everyone, the end users. UAT does not stand for usually a bit of testing. You want to schedule ample time, not only for testing, but to triage and fix defects before they cause unanticipated issues in prod. Every successful smooth running project I've been a part of has had this scheduling in place. Almost every stressful, who knows if we'll actually make it out to go live project I've been on did not schedule enough time for UAT, for bug fixes, anything like that. They're just like, we have this go live date, we're gonna hit it, and that's the worst way to go live. So, make sure that you're scheduling enough testing time, bug fix time, or you're at least need to be willing to be flexible on go live if you're not cramming those things in and, making sure that this is well done. Training environments are also a best-in-class approach for educating end users on how not only to use new features and technologies, but also to reinforce the benefits that they're going to get from all this investment and hard work that you've done. You want to come back to the what's in it for me statements from requirements gathering to really drive home the point of why you're doing things in a new way. So with this, you want to have a good testing strategy. You want to have clear sign off from stakeholders that the system is doing useful things for them. This may seem obvious, but I've been involved in very few projects that actually take this seriously. Only like super big companies that really know what they're doing truly have good stakeholders signing off on the completion of UAT or sprints. And those are the people that are successful and they're doing a lot of good things. This isn't just something where your admin goes through and does some testing and like, looks good to me, and then you push it to production. You need to make sure that the stakeholders understand the expected outcome and they're getting what they want. So you can see if the build items are meeting their criteria. It's also important to involve end users in UAT. This can sometimes almost double as training and will make people aware of the efforts that you're doing to make their life easier on the day-to-day. After you've completed a phase of your project, you'll want to do what you can to ensure that what you've built just works and keeps staying that way. The best way to do this is to convert items of your unit testing into regression testing. If you can have automated regression testing, this will ensure that all of your hard work is not going to get wiped out by admin mistakes or system upgrades or someone just changing a value in a data table. You want to make sure that you have some type of automated testing, like in a sandbox to test against upgrades, or in production to test against whatever accidental data manipulation might be going on. So if you had planned for adoption at each phase, you definitely plan for results as well. Document and share the goals that you're trying to reach and the metrics that you're going to use to show how those goals have been met. Successful projects can really only be proven as a success if you have some quantifiable milestones to reach. With CPQ, you might be trying to achieve faster approval turnaround time, better overall margins, higher average sales. You want to understand how you will not only be able to achieve these goals, but easily report as them as well. So these are the whys of the project, and you'll want to focus on them as guiding principles throughout the implementation. Then, as a famous video game once said, it's dangerous to go alone. Salesforce CPQ is jam-packed with features and functions, and it takes a lot of time to learn them and why you want to use them and why one is better than another. It takes a long time to learn that some things in the products even exist. Learning Salesforce CPQ is a much different discipline than platform or Sales Cloud. I've personally seen dozens upon dozens of failed implementations because they were run by inexperienced resources. I personally struggled and messed up probably the first 5 to 10 projects I did because I made bad assumptions or I didn't know the correct feature or function. When there are really like 8 or 9 different ways to all do the same thing, it's hard to find the best one and know why it's the best one. So make sure you have resources that can do this and tell you these things. So this will help you avoid failure by making sure that someone's been trained, they're certified, and they have done this a few times before, not just once or twice, but 5, 10, 20 times. So yeah, there's a lot of people out there claiming to be CPQ certified or CPQ knowledgeable, but make sure that they have a satisfied customer, that they've actually used Salesforce CPQ specifically. This product has a lot of its own nuances that don't translate from things like Aptus or big machines. And the last piece we want to talk about is just a little bit about Prodly, just like a couple minutes here, what we do and why I work at this company maybe. So I basically quit Salesforce to come work at Prodly, and this is basically what we do. Right now, our best known product to date is a data deployment tool that maintains relationships between related records as you move them from one org to another. If you're using CPQ, you're going to be managing all these relationships every time you do a promotion to production or start up a dev sandbox. CPQ uses more than 40 custom objects that are all mostly related to one another. And this is the basis of its configuration data. It's basically like the source code for how all of CPQ works. You'll find yourself or someone on the project spending dozens of hours maintaining, rebuilding these relationships with Data Loader, unless you have a tool with Prodly to take care of them for you. You'll find yourself, needing to download a bunch of CSVs on the desktops, which if you are saying that you don't ever extract customer data, if you're a partner, or you work at Salesforce or something, then that's kind of a lie. If you're using Prodly, you're definitely not actually doing that. It's all managed through the cloud. So, nothing ending up on desktops where people can, accidentally hit a space bar in a column and make it blank and ruin some type of pricing scenario. And Prodly will do all this even without needing to create external ID fields on all the objects, which is a major chore as you maybe introduce new objects or creating new records to make sure that the IDs are kind of mapping. Prodly will automatically move data between orgs and preserve the relationships with just a few seconds of manual work. You just kind of click a deploy button and it kicks off the process to start downloading all these records and then pushing them to whatever destination environment you want. The bigger things we're doing beyond moving data at Prodly are defining a new software category we're calling AppOps. This is the gap that Prodly aims to fill here. AppOps is our comprehensive solution to the entire lifecycle of maintaining complex reference data-driven applications on Salesforce. Our first product, AppOps Release, automated deployments of reference data between any Salesforce orgs. And we're going to be enhancing that with version control, which will allow you to do rollbacks and use a Git to check in and check out things as a source of truth for all this configuration data. Last week, we released AppOps Test, which automates regression testing of Salesforce CPQ. So you can immediately be notified if an upgrade breaks anything, or if something goes wrong in prod due to data entry or something like that. The next pieces we'll be releasing are build as well as analyze. Build will be purpose-built admin tools for CPQ and FSL that help you create the reference data. So build bundles or build out teams, different things in both those products. And analyze will help you audit and understand performance analytics. So we have a couple next steps that I think Tori wanted to talk about beyond broadly, or maybe some time for questions.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions for you before we jump into that. The first one comes from Shannon, and she actually has two. So the first is, why do you think the DX is the way of the future? Because she's not convinced, but she also wants to know, how many weeks do you think is sufficient for UAT and bug fixes for the average implementation? Knowing she knows that it's tough to ballpark it, but if you could have a basic idea or some recommendation there.
Yeah, sure. So I'll answer the UAT question first. I would say that for every 6 weeks of development, you need 2 weeks of UAT and testing to make sure that things are being delivered well. It kind of depends on your release methodology, like how you want to schedule that. If you're doing really big chunks, you might not necessarily need to be doing like UAT all through it. You don't necessarily need end users feedback all the time. It's better to give them something that's a bit more complete to get some good feedback. But if you feel like, hey, this is a really big systematic change and I want to make sure that I'm not painting myself into a corner or something like that, then yeah, early and often is always good. So, make sure that you're doing that as you do full releases. So, 6 weeks, that would be 2 or 3 sprints before you want to do kind of a full sprint of UAT, is how I would do that kind of in an agile framework. I feel that DX is the way of the future because it allows you to do really granular, smart work as a single developer, or to send it to smaller project teams and get results without holding up like a dev sandbox that you can't refresh. DX allows you to be so much more agile and in sync with what's actually going on in production and get things done faster because you can split up the work. I think that's why it's the future. If you really sit down and think about it and like look at what the impacts are of being able to give people their own scratch orgs and you have a good methodology for seeding them, you're going to get a lot of benefit out of that.
Good. So our last question is from Lori, and she's wondering if you'd recommend avoiding Salesforce CPQ Service Cloud and just use CPQ alone.
I think the question around that is based on the contracting method. So you can generate service contracts instead of contracts that are part of Sales Cloud. They really work pretty much analogous. I would say that, if you need to manage entitlements and have that information easily available for Service Cloud users, then you should use the Service Cloud connector. I don't really see a lot of, pluses or minuses for either one. I guess for the Service Cloud piece, there is a bit of a minus that there is a bit of like an integration gap, but I don't really see like, much of a difference between the two.
Cool. Do you mind changing? So let's go into the next steps.
Okay. Oops.
Thanks. So, we talked a lot about regression testing. We do have our webinar coming up, and it's introducing AppOps Test. It's your regression testing tool. That's going to be happening on Thursday this week at 10 a.m. Pacific. So we'll be sending you a link to that here tomorrow. You'll be receiving a link to that webinar as well as the next one, Derek, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Which is going to be our CPQ Office Hours. So we did get a lot of questions and we weren't able to answer all of them in the time that we had. But if you do have any other questions, you can come back. We're actually doing this with a guest speaker, Joe Jagazar, excuse me, for Original Ship. And he's great. He's going to get upset that I messed up his name. But he also has a ton of experience. He works at Original Ship, which is an excellent partner. and one of our partners as well. And so between he and Derek, they've got 15 years of experience in CPQ or quote to cash and hundreds of projects done. So bring your questions there. You can submit them when you register, and we'll be sure to get to them live on May 5th. So that is that. And again, you'll get all of these resources in your follow-up email, which we'll be sending out to you guys tomorrow. So you'll get the slide deck. You're going to get a recording to this session, as well as links for both this and our AppOps test webinar on Thursday.
And I see that my pal Alex from PulseSource has a question about how Proudly would work with DX Scratch orgs. We have a DX plugin, so you can attach data sets to your Scratch org launch. So basically you can just push in a lot of things. So if you're saying like, hey, I have a really big implementation, you could move this to a Dev Pro, or you could use a subset of the data, or you can likely still get all of the needed CPQ config stuff into a Scratch org if you need to.
Awesome. There's actually another question too from Deepa, and she's asking, some of our users are really confused about using amendments. So they're planning to implement the add-on process. Do you have any recommendations for them?
Just use amendments. The add-on process, quote unquote, is not really different at all. It's just a more convoluted, actually almost deprecated functionality inside of CPQ. So add-on quotes were something that were made in very early version of CPQ and then completely replaced by amendments. And the amendment functionality is like still kind of being developed and supported. So just try to train them to not be confused. I actually think the add-on process is probably more steps overall. So, I would try to stay on board with using amendments and not an add-on.
Great. And Sarah, for your question about the pricing, we'll have someone reach out to you and talk to you about that in your specific situation. Okay. Well, we're out of time. We're about 2 minutes over. If there's any last minute questions, type them in furiously, but I think that we're going to wrap up here.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, everyone. Hope to see you soon.